Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, debatephysics.com also. Video presentation. So, as the thing says here, does anybody really believe it takes, for example, 25 times the fuel to go 5 times as fast? To spin a motor 5 times faster would take 25 times the fuel. Or, in this case, 100 times to go 10 times as fast. Do they really believe that's true? I mean, come on, just answer the question. So this theory has these, I would call that a gaping flaw in the logic of the theory. The implications is that that's what the theory demands to be true. And you can't, in the case of just spinning a motor, you can't use a bunch of relativity arguments and all that nonsense. The forces are obviously moving much faster than the thing that's acquiring the force. There's just no room for a bunch of nonsense about how the universe can't find the energy to make something go 10 times faster. Yes, it can. All right, so let's do this first, and then we'll read a comment and talk about some other stuff. Shadows and different things. All right. So, in line with the question, so this is their scenario, okay? This is their truth. I have a scale. All right, I take an object. I have two objects over here, and they both weigh the same. And I put one object on the scale. All right, they say now I have compressed the scale with 1 unit of energy. So I have 1 energy, whatever, joules, whatever you want to say. So it's 1 joule. It's 1 in amount. And then I do exactly the same thing, same mass, and I put it on the scale. And now I have 2, things on the scale that weigh the same. All right, you just can't distinguish them from each other. And now all of a sudden I have 4 energies. Okay, somehow the second object causes the spring to compress twice as much, and now I have 4 times the energy in the spring. That's their theory. Now, do you believe that's true? Do you believe that can possibly make sense, that somehow when I put 1 on, I get 1 unit of energy, but when I put a second one on, all of a sudden now I have 3 extra units of energy. I got 3 for the same event. I did the same exact event, and I get 3 times the amount of energy out of the event. Now, if their physics isn't saying that, then tell me your physics isn't saying that's not what they say is true. Because there are all kinds of laws about how springs compress, twice the compression, twice the force. That's basically what everybody's been saying. But apparently, again, their kinetic energy theory, 1/2, mv squared, says opposite. It does say that somehow this twice the compression of the spring is 4 times the energy. And if I could compress it 3 times, I'd have 9 times the energy. And if I can compress it 4 times, I have 16 times the energy. Now, is that your theory? I mean, I'd argue it's preposterous. I can't put 3 things on here and have 9 times the energy of just 1. I put 3 on, I get 9 times the energy of just having 1 on there. Come on. So account for it. In some way explain why this isn't the truth and your theory is still right. Is that asking too much? Apparently it is, but whatever. I can only do my part of this conversation, frankly. Anyway, so off to a comment. So Kevin came back and defending himself, and that's okay. I was harsh. I even in a way made a joke out of it. I said the video is a little bit funny, okay, because it's a little hostile. But you can't understand how your clauses and your buts and your conditional statements are, in my opinion, just a guise. Like a troll would do exactly the same thing. Oh, I agree with everything Gary's saying, but, and then he'll type a whole bunch of stuff that basically says exactly the opposite, and then pretend like somehow, the argument wasn't made. Now, you brought up shadows, and then you brought up the fact that the field is changing, but we know in all of these examples the field isn't substantially changing. The wind isn't varying, the stream isn't varying. The raindrops aren't varying. We're not really talking about somehow you get closer to the cloud or something. It still doesn't change the fact that they're falling basically straight down. I mean, there's this idea that somehow you're going to change the force is not valid in these arguments. And then you brought up shadows, implying that somehow shadows are an indication of something, when shadows are just affecting how you can't change what you're doing. What you're collecting in the case of a shadow isn't what changes. How you're affecting the surface is what changes. So it's not, the shadow doesn't get darker because you got hit by more energy. The shadow gets darker because the surface in one tiny area gets hit by less energy, because now you're not spreading your shadow over a large area. Your shadow is getting narrower and narrower. So your shadow is getting stronger, but there's not more energy hitting the object. So the things really aren't connected. You brought up all these peripheral side issues as if they are relevant, and they're not. And that's the simple argument, okay? So you want to make a comment and say, "Here, I have some other irrelevant stuff to talk about." That's fine. But you certainly were trying to make the point that somehow there are nuances to my analogies that break them. And they aren't broken analogies. They're perfectly valid analogies. And that's my opinion of what you were doing. Now, you want to pretend you're doing something else? Okay, you can argue you're doing something else. But it doesn't look like it to me. All right, so I'm still suspect of your intent, your motives, what the hell you're exactly doing here. All right, I did not attack or belittle you in the comment draft. Well, that's the tactic. I'm just saying that that's often what trolls do, is they don't make it obvious. Yeah. Okay, nor was the text directed at you. Well, it's directed at people on Earth, and if you're talking shit, and frankly you were talking shit in my opinion, it shouldn't matter who you're talking to. I should call bullshit, and that's what I did. I called bullshit on the crap you were bringing up as some kind of better argument, counter argument, whatever it was. No argument was made directly or implied that you were incorrect. Yes, it was clearly implied. You were clearly implying, I'm not considering this and I'm not considering that. And you were implying that time dilation has something to do with any of this crap, which it doesn't. Because some of the imagery, the imaginary math, are rate argument. Well, it's not imaginary. So this is the whole point why we're arguing. Because of some imaginary math or rate argument. So again, you were clearly making those kind of arguments when you start talking about how much shadow something casts. You're implying that the shadow is an indicator of something we should pay attention to, when it's totally irrelevant to how much sun is actually hitting the object. It was simply a comment on time, exactly. And frankly, you're trying to imply that time is some sort of other thing than dead reliable, and that it's, you wish to imply that time has a flux to it or something. No. 1 second here is 1 second a billion light years from here. It's all the same 1 second ticking. It's all the same frickin' clock. And if you want to have an argument about relativity, let's have an argument about it. We can talk about how proving that clocks break when you move them doesn't prove, okay, that there's any theory of relativity. Proving you can break a clock isn't proving time isn't a function. Pointing out that if time is indeed a function, to use your word, what word would you want to use? A magical, special, happy thing? I mean, what's your counter argument? It's clearly not a dimension. If you know anything about geometry, there's no room for it to be a dimension because it can't make a right angle to the other three dimensions. So it's kind of silly to call it a dimension, in my opinion. Then altering the function, then altering the variables of that function. So the function has no variables. That's the whole point of what we're saying about time. It's like the speed of light. There's no variables. The force always moves the speed of light, and you can just understand that sometimes it's pushing an electron and it can't go the speed of light just because it's pushing an electron, but its motor is always pumping at the speed of light. Its force potential is always the speed of light. You could argue. And the same is true for time, that there's no way to stop or kill or in any way sequester time. You can't capture it, you can't put it in a bottle, you can't do anything to it. It's a dead constant, and you want to pretend that there has some kind of variables. So again, you want to have those relativity arguments. That's, to me, is a separate subject than the simple water analogies I was using to explain the inverse square law and the fact that the force is time dependent. It's about how much time you allow the wind to push your boat, or how much time your boat is in the stream, or how much time you're standing in the rain, or how much time you're standing in the sun. All right. Would directly alter the measurement of time. So again, this measurement of time thing. The measurement's always consistent because we have the photon to rely on. So it just has to do with the fact that we can't, in any practical way, can't make the light clock. But clearly, me and you would completely disagree on what the light clock is going to do, and that it's not going to change my metabolism at all. It's not going to change who I am or what I am at all. If the universe outside the window is aging, I'm going to be aging. I can't change those facts. You think you can. And that's a huge difference between how we view the world. Photons move at the speed of light, and you can, in fact, go in the same direction that the photons are going. And if you're going in the same direction, the photon won't be moving the speed of light away from you. Doesn't mean it's not moving the speed of light. It's still going the speed of light. Again, it's a bird in a bird cage. I can have a bird going in a bird cage at 50 miles an hour, and then I can drive in a car with the bird still going 50 miles an hour. He's going 50 miles an hour, but if I release him in the direction I'm going, he's only going to go 30 miles an hour away from me. That's just a fact, I think. And so we understand that circumstance differently. Things produce photons at the speed of light always. That's the only speed they can go, and there's nothing relative about it. It's the absolute only speed that the radiation can move at. And if I'm moving in the same direction of my release, there's just no doubt in my mind that it's going to behave just like the rest of the mechanical universe. And frankly, it's not going to leave me at the speed of light. It's not going to gain distance on me. Okay, at the speed of light, it's going to gain distance on me at my speed subtracted from the speed of light. The shadow analogy was to help those who have incorrectly reified the concept of time. I don't even know what that could possibly mean. And you say incorrectly based on what? So, I don't know what that means. Reified. What does that mean? The concept of time. I don't know. What are you arguing? So what's your point? So again, how is this on the subject, I'd say? And second, it seems like you're implying that there's some factor that messes up understanding the simple point that if I'm going to spin a motor 10 times as fast, it ain't going to take 100 times the energy. Okay, nothing more. Well, I really don't understand. Nothing more than what? The shadow analogy was help those who have incorrectly reified the concept of time. Nothing more. Well, I don't even know what that is, so how can I know what more would be? And not directed at you. And again, this isn't about what's directed at me. It's on my comment section. You're proposing some kind of physics theory. I have a right to fucking react to it. God damn, I have a right to react to it if you posted it somewhere else. And I certainly have a right to react to it if you post it in my comment section. You shove it in my face. You didn't shove it in everybody's face. You shoved it in my face, fucker. There's only 100 people reading these comments, and I'm sort of the most obvious one. All right. I was hoping it would be, at the very least, get another viewer thinking. Thinking what? What were they supposed to think exactly? So you didn't really make it clear what they were supposed to think. They were supposed to think somehow shadows indicate how much energy you're collecting. When no, shadows indicate how you're distributing energy on a surface. And it doesn't have anything to do with how much energy you're collecting. Instead, I get a video of you ranting and attacking me about stuff I didn't even write. So that's your claim. Now, I clearly, in my opinion, you wrote stuff indicating there's some things we're not considering, that we need to consider these extra factors, that there's some sort of extra stuff that's somehow significant and important to the subject of whether a stream can give something 4 times the energy by giving it twice the velocity. When I was talking about m squared, when was I talking about m squared? Well, clearly that's what the subject is. And the subject was the fact that all of these analogies have to do with proving time dependence. Okay, so it's not about m squared, it's about v squared. So I don't even know where you're getting this m squared part from. I guess you meant to say mv squared? Okay. When I was nitpicking flow rates. When was I nitpicking flow rates? When you start talking about how the gravitational potential changes. If I go up or I go down, when you're making your shadow argument that somehow something's collecting more energy because it goes up and down. Now, I agree that it will if it goes up and down 100 miles. But none of these analogies are really talking about changing your gravitational potential. We're saying you're going through a field that has an average gravitational potential of 9.8. We're not talking about trying to evade rain. We're not talking about running into rain. Obviously, none of these, even if you could run into the rain, even if it was a real effect, it's a tiny effect. You're only going to change the amount of wetness you get by a tiny amount. What decimal points are you talking about, Draft? The ones you brought up by saying that somehow there's a variable rate, and none of the analogies had a variable rate in them. Okay. You draw such an issue when you are misquoted and misrepresented. Yes, or harassed by nitpickers. You want me to put you in the category? I'll put you in the category. It's no better. Misquoting me and misrepresenting me are just as bad as nitpicking me, frankly. Okay, I mean, changing the subject, trying to pretend there's some other subject, that's just as bad, frankly. Yet you have just done the very thing you so often are complaining about. So you say somehow I misrepresented your argument. I argued that shadows are irrelevant, and then I argued that the tiny bit of difference in the 9.8 that any of these things are talking about is tiny. And in some of the analogies, there is no 9.8 that can be fluctuated, like the stream analogy. The stream doesn't change. You can't change how much pressure it's applying. There is no place where it's 9.8 and then it's 6.7 and then it's 5.8. None of that happens in those analogies. The rain analogy, it's a constant rate of rain, so it doesn't matter how high you go or how low you go, it's still the same constant amount of rain. So again, you're the one who injected some notion that these analogies break down because of variances in the strength of the field. And so I just pointed out how the variance in these arguments are 100 decimal point variances. They're so minute and minuscule that nobody but a crazy anal nutcase could sit there and say they matter. And certainly they don't matter for the sake of making the clear argument of analogizing to something simple and explaining how it's basically that simple. All right, the text was right in front of you, yet you still went out of your way to create whatever this is, fictitious arguments. So again, I didn't. I read your sentences. I talked about what you brought up. I didn't mistreat your text at all. And you're the one, claiming you didn't bring up these side subjects in some kind of way to indicate that these are worthy subjects of consideration when trying to appreciate what we can analogize gravity to, and add nefarious meanings to the simple and benign comments. So you say they're benign, I say they look pretty, they don't look benign to me. I am not attacking you. You're playing a game with me, maybe. Maybe you're trolling me, maybe you're doing some sort of when somebody does something and then somebody tries to say, oh yeah, well I did that on Thursday. I don't know, you're trying to do some one-upsmanship of some kind. And I'm not calling you out in any way in that comment. Well, you certainly, in my opinion, you're calling out the subject, and you're saying the subject has nuance that you don't think anybody's appreciating, and you think this nuance is something interesting and important, and I'm arguing, of course, it's not. Next time, hold yourself to the standard you are demanding of everyone else. So I'm not demanding much of a standard. Frankly, I didn't get into your personal life anyway. I made a few jokes. That's all I did, okay? I didn't make any direct accusations that you actually stick chess pieces up your butt. But whatever. I certainly didn't, like I said, I didn't post images of your house or something. So, again, here you are trying to imply that I've aggrieved you in some horrible way because I honestly responded to the comment I saw. I explained how I didn't like it. It looks kind of suspicious to me. I explained exactly why I was reacting the way I was. Because you were basically implying that something hasn't been considered here and that there's a loophole. There's some kind of loophole that fixes this 100 times the energy to go 10 times faster problem. And there is no loophole that fixes it. It's garbage theory. You didn't say that. I agree that 1/2 mv squared is garbage fable. That you could have said right up front. But you didn't. Alright. So whatever. Be butthurt. I don't care. Okay, one way or the other. It's nice for people to make contributions. I'm all for, you have some theory, like I said, you want to argue about time, then just say, look, I'm going to argue about time being a dimension, and present my evidence, blah, blah, blah. What the fuck was that? It's always something. Alright, should be back. Anyway, alright, so we'll move on. Maybe I just talk a little bit about shadows and then I'll get the hell out of here. So it is sort of interesting to think about shadows, and when you're casting a shadow, typically, you're casting a shadow of not the light from the sun, but the light that's coming from all the other places it's been bent to, diffracted to by the atmosphere. So the sunlight, hits the earth and it goes in all kinds of directions through the atmosphere, and so it ends up having all kinds of vectors. So if you're an object and you're going to block sunlight, you're blocking this kind of light, a lot of that kind of stuff. And as you get closer to a surface like the earth, your shadow gets darker because essentially the light you're blocking hitting this point. So it's really just about how this sees the world, and what you're doing is blocking its vision. And so as you block its vision, as you get closer and closer, you cut more of these vision lines for the surface, and so there's obviously less places sunlight can come from. So you're really blocking not the sun, because you block that by being here. I mean, at this location you could be blocking all the direct rays from the sun. You're blocking them. You can't block them twice. You've already blocked them. So the light that you're really blocking is the stuff coming from angles, okay, from other parts of the atmosphere. So if you did this stuff in space or looking down a deep well or something, it's very different, because then you have straight line light. So like in space, it's just the sun, and there's these straight lines coming from the sun, and there's no light coming from any other location but the sun. So basically your shadow is your shadow, for quite a bit of distance. And you can't really make your shadow more than your shadow once you block the entire sun. I mean, once you've created enough, once you're close enough to block out the whole sun, you're pretty much as dark as you're going to get, because there's no other source of light for you to block. There's just the sun. So, shadows, it would be interesting if in the space shuttle thing in the space station, they actually did some of that shadow stuff and showed, like when they're working outside the space station or something, that the reflected light from other pieces of the space station, they can block that light, but there's very little other sources besides the sun. It's the only source of strong enough light to create a shadow, and the rest of the light sources aren't strong enough for them to create a shadow. I don't know about the moon. I guess you might be able to create a shadow in space from the moon. It might be enough light, but I'm not sure. But anyway, Yeah, they don't even do much with that. You know, there's not too many images from like the space station, you know, where they show the moon and the Earth together. You know, and that's sort of a, you know, that would, it's more interesting kind of image. Anyway, even when they did that new telescope and they shot it in space, I would think they could have taken a picture backwards. Because they, oh yeah, that's right, they placed it in between the Earth and the moon. Okay, never mind. All right, so I believe they did anyway. Yeah, it's the only place they could go because there's no gravity there, so they don't have to move it around much. There's no differential in the gravity. Okay. Should never say no gravity. Should just say no differential in the force. So anyway, yeah, it's probably enough. We don't need to go on and on about stuff. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, you know, I keep doing to try to encourage some other physicists to get involved. So I do throw out emails now and then just suggesting they should pay attention to the kinetic energy subject. But you know, it's hard to provoke their interest. And such, and you know, until other people do it, I guess, you know, until other people harass Simon Dan, you know, by saying, "Why are you afraid of draft physics?" or something, you'll remain a coward and keep avoiding me. But anyway, not much you can do about it. So till the next time and such, I think it's enough of a video. Yeah, it's enough. Yeah, I don't think there was any other. Oh, there was some little website comment. Maybe I can go find that real quick. Just some sort of tripe. You have way more in common with Time Cube guy than any physicist. So again, these are people, apparently they go out and look for these flat earthers and these Time Cube people and people with all kinds of wacky theories. And then they're pointing a finger at me and saying that somehow I'm like those people when you're the one that seems interested in those people, not me. You are the one, you are one of the kookiest kooks. Well, then why are they afraid to debunk me when I'm offering to pay them to do it? So the Simon Dan case, why wouldn't he take my money to debunk me? I mean, I'm going to pay him to make a fool out of me. Go ahead, do it. And they won't take the money. That makes sense to you? Okay. Whoever recouped. Yeah, so that just, boy, that's just so brilliant. I don't know how the hell I could possibly counter-argue such an articulate statement. Oh, no. Yeah, I think I can. I think I can handle that one. Amazing. Just fucking amazing. This is the best they can do. All right. Till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot.